When I was a kid, there were a lot of things I thought I'd want to be when I grew up. Astronaut, restaurant owner, maybe even President of the United States. What I never thought I would be is the girl who went viral for dumping a bowl of punch on her new husband's head at her wedding reception. But let me explain. People always told me I had an easy life. And for a long time, I did. My parents made lots of money with their company. At school, I was very popular. When I had sleepovers, my parents served elaborate dinners and let us use the home movie theater in the basement. I had servants who took care of my chores. On my 13th birthday, my parents hired a circus to come to our house. You get the picture. Once, at school, this girl got mad at me and said, "Oh my God, Mila, you're so clueless, aren't you? Nobody actually likes you. They just like your money." Of course, my friends put that girl in her place. But her words really hurt. I wasn't clueless. And people did like me for who I was. Towards the end of high school, my parents started acting weird. They were anxious and irritable all the time. We stopped going to fancy dinners, and we let some of the servants go. I tried to ask what was going on, but my dad said, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, princess. Everything will be all right." I noticed that when we did go places, our security guards went with us. Once I turned 18 and started going out more on my own, they got me my own personal security guard. Jake wasn't that much older than me, and he was very cute, so I didn't object. He totally started flirting with me. I loved it so much, I kind of forgot to wonder why we needed more security in the first place. One night, Jake and I were lying under the stars together, talking about our future. I said I'd probably work for my parents' company. He laughed at me. "Do you even understand what they do?" That hurt. "I don't know much about it, but I'll learn." He shook his head. "You're so spoiled. You just snap your fingers and everything you need magically appears. How are you going to help run a business?" I got embarrassed then. He acted like he was teasing, but he wasn't. He kept asking me questions about the company, and I felt embarrassed and stupid for not knowing the answers. I didn't want to be some spoiled princess, not even knowing where all my money came from. That night, I tried asking my dad some questions. He just told me not to worry because I'd always have whatever I wanted in life. Wasn't that good enough for me? Eventually, I gave up asking. After that, I barely spoke to Jake. I mean, okay, he had been right. There was a lot I didn't know, but he'd been rude to point it out. I kept hoping he'd be mad that I was giving him the cold shoulder, but he didn't seem to notice. Once, I slammed my shoulder into his in the hall as we passed, like I didn't even see him. But he just kept talking on the phone to his buddy about some big plan of theirs coming up. Except the next night, I came home to find my bedspread covered with flower petals and a card on my pillow. The card was from Jake. He apologized for teasing me and said he knew I was smart and would go far in life. I sighed dreamily, looking at the rose petals. I knew it was cheesy, but it worked. I was totally falling for him. On graduation night, there was going to be a big bonfire for the seniors at a classmate's house. I was so excited to go. I even begged my parents to let me go without Jake. I mean, okay, I'd been drooling over him ever since he apologized. This was the end of my senior year. I didn't want to be the girl who showed up to the party with a babysitter. Also, I didn't want to remind my classmates I was different from them. Ever since that night Jake had called me spoiled, I'd tried to be myself more at school. I was finally starting to feel like I fit in, like people liked me for me. Before I left, my dad shoved a huge folder into my bag. "Here," he said, "some kindling for the bonfire." "What's this?" I asked. "Just some old bank statements and stuff. They say even when you shred those, people can sometimes piece them back together. Don't want to take any chances. Just promise me you'll throw it right into the fire, okay?" I know I probably should have been crazy suspicious at that point, but I had led such a sheltered life. I trusted my parents completely. I walked to the party, ready to make the most of this night of total freedom. But suddenly, I heard footsteps pounding up behind me. It was too late for me to even turn before someone slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. I went sprawling, my bag coming off my shoulder. The person grabbed it, and out of pure reflex, I held on to one strap of it. We played tug of war, but the other person was stronger. They pulled the bag away from me and ran off into the night. Oh God, my dad was going to be so mad at me. What about the bank statements? Was the thief going to steal my family's bank information or something? I stood, my legs like jelly. I was scraped and bruised from the sidewalk. Suddenly, a familiar voice said, "Mila? Are you okay?" It was Jake. I didn't think. I just threw myself into his arm. "What's wrong?" he asked. I told him my bag had been stolen, but I begged him not to tell my dad. I didn't want my parents ever to know. Jake promised, and suddenly I realized how awkwardly close we were standing. My palms started to sweat. "Did my parents make you follow me?" I asked. I couldn't believe it. After I'd asked them to let me go to the party alone, even in the dim light of the street lamps, I could see him blush. "No," he said. "I was looking for you. I can't let you go alone. I worry too much." I think that was the moment I fell in love with him. My knight in shining armor. A couple of weeks later, my new happiness was shattered. I came home from a friend's house to find people in suits moving all the furniture out of my house. I begged for someone to tell me what was going on, but no one would. I didn't even know where my parents were. Finally, one of our maids told me that my parents had been arrested. I still didn't understand, but a sick feeling in my stomach told me that this might have something to do with my stolen bag and the folder my dad had given me. Poor, stupid little rich princess. My life was about to become a nightmare. A few years later, I was ringing up customers at a clothing store in the mall when a customer pointed to me. "You're that girl from the news. You're scum, just like your parents." I was used to this happening. I had moved away from my former town, but people still recognized me. My parents' case had gotten international media attention. Apparently, they had been running a pyramid scheme for years. They'd stolen lots of people's money. My mom was under house arrest, and my dad was serving prison time. I'd been clueless. At first, I couldn't believe my old life was gone. I'd lost everything. My money, my friends, my chance to go to college. I hadn't even known where to begin looking for a job. An old classmate who felt sorry for me had helped me get this one. The only thing I hadn't lost was Jake. He was my rock, and he stuck with me during the trial and the mess that followed it. He wasn't officially my security guard anymore, but he would still walk places with me and chase the press away when they tried to interview me. I was so grateful to him. That night, we were sitting in our apartment with glasses of wine. It wasn't very expensive wine, and I still had to remind myself not to be disappointed by things like that. He'd made me a nice candlelit dinner, but my mind was still elsewhere. I finally told him about that customer. "You know people are always going to be like that," he said. "You can't let it get to you." I told him I knew that, but I just wished that my life hadn't turned out this way. It wasn't fair that I had to get a job. I missed my old house, and I missed my parents. "You need to learn to work for what you want," he told me. "You're not special just because your parents had money, and they deserved what they got." It felt like a slap in the face. I stormed out of the kitchen and shut myself in our bedroom. A few hours later, he came in. He apologized and said that wasn't how this night was supposed to go. I asked him what he meant, and he pulled out a small velvet box. He got down on his knee beside the bed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "You're very strong," he told me, "and I know that you are learning how to work for what you want in life. I admire that about you. Will you marry me?" I could hardly keep from squealing. I jumped off the bed and pulled him up, and he took me in his arm. It was still another year before we had money for a wedding. As the big day drew near, I got some amazing news. My dad was getting out of prison early. He would be there to walk me down the aisle. I hadn't visited him in prison until recently. For many years, I felt so betrayed by him and didn't want anything to do with him. But I started answering his letters a couple of months ago. With this new chapter starting in my life, I realized I needed to forgive him. I told him that there was someone special in my life, someone I thought he would be excited to meet, but I didn't want to give away the surprise until Dad was out of prison and could meet my fiancé face to face. I hoped that he would be happy for me. 2 days before the wedding, Jake started getting antsy. I wondered if he had doubts about marrying me. I finally asked him what was wrong, but he wouldn't say. I told him I was hurt that he would keep secrets from me, especially since we were about to be husband and wife. He said I was right. He was just nervous about the wedding, but didn't want to ruin my good mood. He didn't want there to be any secrets between us. Just love. I thought that sounded perfect. On the big day, my dad and I waited in the wings until it was time for him to walk me down the aisle. First, we watched Jake come out with his mom. Well, my dad watched Jake, and I watched my dad to see his reaction. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Oh no, maybe he was upset to see a reminder of our past. I hoped he would get over it and help me celebrate this magical day. There was no more time to think about it before we started strolling down the aisle. I smiled bigger than I ever had in my life as I met Jake at the altar. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. At the reception, I danced and danced. My dad found me a couple of times and told me that we needed to talk, but I was having too much fun. It was definitely the happiest day of my life. But eventually, he pulled me off to the side. "I need to tell you something, Mila," he said. "The man you just married is the one who destroyed our family." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "What are you talking about?" "He hired somebody to steal your bag that night. I thought I was being safe by having you take the folder and burn it. We were already under suspicion, so law enforcement was watching our property all the time. They would have noticed a fire. I wanted the documents destroyed off of our property." I couldn't believe what he was telling me. "Jake would never do that," I said. "He rescued me that night, so you wouldn't suspect him," my dad said. "He told the thief exactly when to attack you, so he would be there to swoop in and save you." God, you're so clueless. "What happened to us is your fault," I told my dad. "No one else's. You're the one who stole from people. You deserve to get caught." I stormed away back into the reception hall looking for Jake. He might have done the right thing, technically, by exposing my dad's crime, but he lied to me for years. And just the other day, he said he wanted no secrets between us. What a hypocrite. I grabbed the punch bowl off the table as I walked in. Jake was busy talking to his best man and didn't notice me. I came right up to him and overturned the entire bowl on his head. He gasped and sputtered, dripping wet, bits of fruit clinging to his hair and his tuxedo. Honestly, it was the most satisfying moment of my life. Some people were laughing, thinking it was a joke. Other people looked nervous. The photographer was snapping pictures like crazy, and everybody's cell phone was in the air taking their own photos and video. "You liar!" I yelled at Jake. I took my rings off and threw them on the floor. Is it too late to take my vows back? Because even if I said I do, now I don't. For the next 2 weeks, Jake tried calling me every day, but I wouldn't pick up. I was once again in the center of a media storm. People would snap pictures of me on the street. I was in videos and memes all over the internet. I didn't care. I just stayed in my house, too depressed to go out. I was really clueless, and because of that, I'd lost everything. One day, on my way home from the store, I found Jake waiting outside my building. He begged me to come in, saying he wanted to talk. I finally gave in. We ended up talking for hours. He told me the whole story, how angry he was when he found out about my parents' scheme. He wanted to get some proof to show the FBI. Because he hung around me so much, he knew about my dad asking me to take that folder to the bonfire. I was trying not to cry. "So, that whole time, you were only pretending to like me?" He begged me to believe that he'd always liked me. But he hadn't wanted me to join my parents' company and get involved in their crimes. He just wanted me to be my own person. And once I started doing that, he fell completely in love with me. "You ruined my whole life," I told him. "I know. I'm sorry. I thought about telling you 1,000 times. But you didn't," I told him. "And you know what's ironic? You gave me the strength to be my own person. So now, I'm strong enough to tell you that I don't want you anywhere near me ever again." He looked shocked. He said he was hoping we could work things out, that now that this was out in the open, there'd be no more secrets between us. So now, instead of a wedding photo in my apartment, I have a framed picture of me dumping punch over Jake's head. Sure, it's a little unusual, but it reminds me every day that I'm nobody's spoiled princess anymore.